Welcome, everybody, to another edition of DCD Discover Dialogues. We're very excited today to have Ashely Colours Perez as our guest. And this series focuses on some of the topics that don't get a lot of attention in dance, like publications and research, some of that sort of behind the scenes stuff that we don't always hear about. So I just want to begin by acknowledging where we are in the world. We're in Toronto or Toronto, and this is where Dance Collection Dance's office is located, which is the land that the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee, Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. It has been a site of human activity, including dance, for at least 15,000 years or more, and we are grateful to all the caretakers, both recorded and unrecorded, of this land and of Turtle Island. Today, the meeting place of Toronto, is still the home of many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live, work, and dance in this community on this territory. So as I mentioned, our guest today is Ashely Colours Perez. Ashely is a teacher, a dancer, and choreographer. She's the co-artistic director of Mix Dance Collective, which has showcased work at Fall for Dance North, Contemporaneity 3.0, and represented Canada at the 2017 Jeux de la Francophonie in Abidjan. Ashely's talent was awarded a 2018 Dora Mavor Moore Award for Outstanding Performance for an Ensemble in the Dance Division for Floored, which was presented by Holla Jazz in 2018. Ashely continues to teach street dances with her class with colors, and she recently completed her MA in dance at York University. Welcome, Ashely. Yeah, you
Thanks
can
for
unmute. So let's start at the beginning, Ashely. Tell us about the role that social dance played in your youth in Calgary. I know you grew up learning Caribbean folk dances, and I just want to hear more about that experience growing up.
I'm really like relaxed on the Zoom, so I probably will be like eating and like snacking.
That's fine.
Like I'm like we're like having a coffee. So yeah, I'm originally from Calgary, Alberta. I'm based in Toronto now. So before I had any access to dance or whatever's in the bio, like we just gathered. There was like a very small Caribbean community in Calgary, and they a lot of the children would gather together. But even before that, we gathered on the weekends, like as a form of like childcare for us, and we just the music would play whatever the hottest, tracks were, whatever the CDs were. We just played music and gathered and danced. So it was like maybe 3 different families that would gather like on the weekends, and it was just music in the basement basically.
Right.
So which would be like if social dance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so were you learning like who was teaching you the folk dances? Like what were you learning? Calypso? What kind of
This is
were you learning?
before, so like I would say social dances when you're like being social with other folks, so the gatherings, like the community part of it. And then when I was around 6 or 7, I started dancing. My mom and my godmother were like my first dance teachers. I think it was also a new role for them to do the choreography. So there would be like the adults would be singers, so they would learn the folk songs.
Yeah.
And then the children would learn like the dances. So we did it was like Jamaican and Trinidadian folk dances. So we did like some gospel sections, before Christmas or the holiday, and then for like the end of the year, that would be like in May, we it would be called Caribbean Night. We would like song our new rhythm, because every year in the islands there's new rhythms and new songs for carnival, so we would hear what the new songs were, and then my mom and my godmother would make some work to what's in and what's hip and cool, but we would also do like an African number, and then we would do like, yeah, so a lot is a lot, and then maybe some hip hop, but we weren't really allowed to do hip hop
Right.
back
Right.
in the
Right.
early 90s.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But that clearly came back into your life. I remember you telling me that when you were, I guess, in your teens and you started to get into pop music, you would you
Hmm.
began researching the choreographers of the music videos, which is really interesting because clearly you have an instinct for research, to be doing that at such a young age. So like I'm curious to
Yeah.
hear more about that impulse
I
to do
mean,
that and what drove that curiosity.
oh my gosh, now that I think back about it, I'm like zipping back and forth, but like to be like, a few of like, there's not many Black folks in Calgary, especially at that time. So I watched we watched a lot of TV growing up, a lot of music videos. So I would just, anything that was like a Black person singing, dancing, I was like, who's that? What is that? That's amazing. And I would just like hone in on that skill, or not that skill, but like that fantasy. And then there was like a gap in like my youth. Like I had cancer, so I went through like all that into early 2000s. So I had, I would say about like a year or so kind of recovering,
Okay.
and watching just like a lot of videos. And it was pop music. My siblings loved hip hop like
Mhm.
crazy. They loved it, loved it, loved it, but I wanted something that I was like, oh, something like kind of like light and easy and refreshing for me. So
Mhm.
I loved Britney Spears. I loved NSYNC. I loved just like all these folks dancing. And then I researched that a lot of them were like, their choreographers were had like a hip hop dance background. So from there, that's when I started doing some research and more about like the choreographers, and also just seeing like a Black person behind the scenes. I'm like, okay, what's going on there? So
Yeah.
that's how I like did a lot of that kind of research mostly. I mean, and I didn't grow up in a dance studio. I didn't grow up having access to those spaces. So it was really about like watching a music video over and over again, taping it, rewinding it, learning it.
Right,
And
right.
this
Yeah.
was also early internet too, where there's a lot of like fan pages. So I would go on the internet and see the fan pages, and
Right, right. Yeah. I
there.
love that you
Yeah.
did that research though, because that, like when it comes to pop culture and music videos, the choreographers of those videos are rarely credited. They,
Yes.
we hardly ever hear about them or can name them.
Hmm.
And yet the
Hmm.
work that they've done is like has a household name, right? Like it's
Yeah.
known by so many, and yet they're a buried part of the
Hmm.
process, which is quite unfortunate.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. And that's, yeah, sorry.
well, I was just going to say, it's just, I think it's quite unusual and quite remarkable that it drove your curiosity to look them up, to find out about them. I'm sure they would appreciate that, to know that someone was
Yeah. And
taking
like, that's also another part of like the research that I didn't know that that I was actually researching. I thought I was researching something, and then I was like, I'm actually researching the people behind the stars, really.
Yes.
To Because like pop culture, everyone shades pop culture. Like, oh, it's too easy, it's too light, it's too this. But I'm like, pop music is international. Like it brings everyone together,
Mhm.
right? And vibing together. So who are those dancers that are like literally lifting the star across the stage, holding up, and then who's that person who's like, okay, you go there and you try this. And also, yeah, like we don't get a lot of credit. They don't get a lot of credit. And a lot of, acting, a lot of dancers switch to acting. So it's hard actually to find them labeled under dance. They're usually under like the actor
That's
thing.
true.
So
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
little hack for
Yeah.
your research.
Yeah. So watching and imitating those videos, like, so then what's the next step in terms of how that research carried you into a professional career in dance?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so yeah, basically watching pop music. I started high school and I was like, oh, I don't really fit in. Like I fit in, but like I'm not like, getting A pluses. And then I'm also like not in the drama, not doing drama, music, terrible at sports. So I was like, okay, like I would love to dance again. And like we have so many big open spaces, a gym space. It was in like a new high school. And I was like, I want like a dance team. Like I want us to like dance and learn dances. So with my art teacher and I was like, can you supervise us? Because we need someone to supervise us so that we can, stay after school for a few hours and put these dances together. So she was like she helped us get everything ready, print out all the signage sheets, make sure we had a boom box and a safe space for everyone to gather beforehand. So I started doing a dance team in my high school. We did I think we made about 3 solid dances. Still a lot of work. 3 solid dances, and it was about 30 of us. And that's where I like really recreated those pop videos on them. And then from there, like just like the last couple months of grade 12 high school, I auditioned, or like I took some of the members and we auditioned for something called Holla Back, which was like a hip hop dance like showcase, like a theater piece that some of the dancers from the University of Calgary were doing, because they have a dance program at U of C. So there was some folks focusing strictly on hip hop dances. And so we auditioned for that. And the fact was that your dance is great, but don't dance to Britney Spears because that's pop. And that's when I started to be like, okay, like it's different things. And so we had to rejig it. I had to shift my mindset of like, okay, so we're not doing pop, we're not doing like, palatable stuff for other folks. Like we're sticking to what hip hop is. And hip hop was getting pretty big around 2003 and 4, more noticeable. So that's when I started researching more hip hop. And I also started to learn under students, post-secondary students. So I was a little bit younger than them. So they were kind of like, you come here and, we did a lot of sessioning in the big rooms at U of C. And I stayed there for a few years and, rehearsed and learned everything about hip hop in those rooms. And so from there, I met another dancer. Her name is Katie Dangercat. So she had like an arts, I think like a wearable art performance happening at OCAD, and was like, I'm researching like, Grace Jones and Vogue. And at the same, like at that time, everything's so fragmented, right? Like it's not as like cut and dry as we know it here. Like the majority of like people that participate in street dance around early 2000s, we didn't know what it was. We just saw clips from like 80s movies and we're like, what is that? And what is that? And then maybe someone would bring and this is also the time when like the originators were starting, like people were like, come and teach these dances. People need to learn them properly. They're not getting what they're, they're not getting the proper education from studio culture. So you need to come and teach. So at that time, I worked with House of Danger Cat, and we were like, let's like dress up really cool and then add some of these like waacking and vogue, anything that we like gobbled up and loved about our culture. We blended it into House of Danger Cat.
Okay.
And from there, we kind of went viral and we kind of went like international for like, it was like a little blip. It was like, maybe about a year. Yeah, like a few years of being like really like internet going to like, fashion weeks and like doing just like a lot of like wild wild things.
Right.
And also, yeah, and also like Danger Cat was really good at she's an artist, so like having the bio, having a website in like the early 2000s, like that's so much work. When YouTube just started, it's like, okay, get that up on YouTube. So that's kind of how we did that. That's how everything kind of exploded into those times of like being at UFC, learning, unlearning a lot of like hip hop practices, and then relearning from like the originators and like taking the time to take their classes. And really, it's not a physical class. A lot of them are like 3-hour long lectures, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like you'll learn one move. Yeah, you'll learn like one thing, and then they're like, well, this came from this and this. And so it's like, for like a physical body, we're like, oh, that's off track. But like for like someone who wants to know what the culture is, you're like, oh, you're getting like way more bang for your buck here. And at that time, none of us were really focused into like a particular form. We were literally learning anything we could get our hands on. So like, everyone took a pop class, everyone took a breaking class, everyone, I didn't really take a breaking but everyone took a locking and a popping and a, you know, even a Vogue class. We all just like ate it.
And are you doing this in like while you're touring around doing fashion weeks and whatever shows around in different places? That's where you're getting the opportunity to study with originators who can give you way more depth about the movement and the forms. Is that right?
Actually, a lot of it came from Calgary.
Oh, it did. Okay.
Yeah, Tara Wilson brought in a lot of the old originators and would have workshops called Get Down and bring them for a few weeks, and it'd just be like a hardcore intensive. And a lot of folks from all over would come to Calgary to train with them. So this is like early 2000s. And then when we were ready to go to Paris or London or New York, we already knew some of the styles. So people were really like, what the hell is happening in Calgary? Like, so we already knew some of them. And so when we were there, it was more when we were dancing, we were mostly showcasing, because, you know, street dance, hip hop is like your crew, like you're showing, you know, what your crew can do with this vocabulary. So it was kind of like we were showcasing, but also like we kind of had to like battle.
Oh yeah. Okay.
You know, like, oh, like you're not doing it the right way kind of thing. So yeah, we went internationally. That's where we met everyone from the community that was also doing it in their cities, but it was also, we had to like step up and be like, okay, well, like I'm the best at this, or you know, we just met our peers during that time. Yeah. I'm talking a lot. I'm like, blah, blah.
That's good. You're supposed to be talking a lot. That's good.
Yeah, that's true. That's why we're here.
That's why we're here. That's right. Okay, so I want to talk about waacking and waacking. So there's WHACK waacking, and then there's WAACK waacking. So why are there two spellings? Is there a difference between these two forms, and what are they exactly?
Well, so with the waacking and the waacking, so the double, we have two A's in the waacking, we replace the H, right? So you have whack to means to strike with force. So it's an actual word, whereas like with a double A, it's more for me. Please don't come for me, whackers. I'm trying to sort it out as well, where it's like a method.
Mm-hmm.
2 A's is like another way of doing the dance, another school of the dance, because the original name is actually called punking. Punking is the dance, is the world of the dance, the culture of the dance. Waacking, to whack is to strike, it's to hit, it's to bam. So it takes from the like Batman and Robin, like the fight scenes,
Right.
where it's like strike, hit,
right.
bam, bam,
And
boom,
yeah.
pop.
And the words
So
would
it
here
is
too,
called
right?
punking. Yeah, it's called punking, but from that it could even be called bamming or bam or strike. Like it could be called that, right?
Yeah.
So the reason we call it waacking is because punking is like, or to be a punk is a derogatory term, right? So it kind of smooths it out a bit so that it's able to, be palatable and go mainstream and go pop and go pop culture. So with a double A, it's also a way of like separating a bit from punking and also moving away and trying a different form. That's mostly with Tyrone Proctor, that had their group. Shoot, it's like missing me here. It's in my notes. I've done so much research that I kind of like take it away. But yeah, Tyrone had a group with like Jody Watley and some of the members of Shalimar, and it was mostly like from the Soul Train folks that were on Soul Train that did like more of the double A waacking, and that also like moved over to New York as well.
Right. So it originates in LA, right?
It originates in LA in the 70s and in I guess gay clubs, and I'm researching those.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to research that blurb that I always see on like Wikipedia, or always see it. It's just like waacking is this, and it's like, okay, so which gay bars, where, and who was there, right? So the waacking that I kind of fell into was more like East Coast waacking. Brian Footwork Green, I think, brought waacking in again for House Dance International, and would have like, I think it was the first like waacking battle. So it was the first time we kind of like saw it. But when waacking came back, it was mostly as like a battle format. So that's how the dance kind of came back to life again, was through that sphere. Before, I don't think there was battles. I think it was just more like a club dance. Before like we codify it, but and a lot of the Montreal dancers, they would bring in Tyrone and they would do privates with him. And so, even Montreal is like they did a lot for the waacking community. They like brought it back up and out, right? So
right.
Yeah, so there's like the East Coast, Montreal, New York way of doing it.
Right. So the developments in Montreal, like you're saying, that they had an impact even in the US in terms of surviving, right?
Oh yeah, because they would train with Tyrone and then they would go to New York to battle. So a lot of the times you see them, they're battling each other. And that's why those battles are, everyone's like, oh, this waacking dance is so like, whoa, because I'm like, they have been in the room together, training together, listening to the same music, side by side. Like they have to go off on the battle, like you're battling, your same kind of skill set.
Yeah.
So they would battle each other. And that's, actually what made the dance look really strong and powerful, is that they had something different to show.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. right.
Mhm.
But really
Getting
it originates in gay
in
culture
LA.
in LA. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay. And you were telling me too, that it's a form that's more often practiced by women now. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. When I was doing it, it is, but I think it is like starting to be more inclusive,
Mm.
and more of the LGBTQ plus communities
Mhm.
recognizing it as a dance from their community. So they
Yeah.
are coming in. A lot of them would go straight to Vogue,
Uh,
because ballroom culture also has is a culture, right? So Vogue is one of the categories you do. So there's more that you can live in and breathe in within that community. And punking, because a lot of the originators passed away before this dance even became waacking,
mhm.
um, we're still figuring out what it is, and also like the family dynamic. And that's one thing that I'm starting to realize is like, okay, we don't have that family dynamic within punking culture.
Mhm.
It's very like individualistic.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
it's really hard when you're looking for something, and then the way we practice this dance is really hardcore, right? It's like
Yeah.
you have to be kind of able-bodied, and your shoulders, and like it's a lot going on. So for it's really hard to bring people in and keep people in,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's a quite intimidating dance. And I think it is also meant to be intimidating. It's a survivor's dance. It's a
Yes. Right.
survival dance, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Like
there's a lot to unpack.
thinking about the community in which it originated, the time and the place in which it originated, its trajectory, or its I guess its expansion into other groups of people must have been impacted by HIV/AIDS in the 80s,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if
I
you're
mean,
losing the practitioners, you lose the possibilities of expansion.
and also it's a generational thing. Like, I
Mhm.
think we don't really, because when we do see our originators, we're like, oh, I don't get them, I don't know what they're saying. Also, it's like American culture compared to like Canadian culture. Like, also, like, Black folks and people of color are not a monolith. Like, we are different. And like, I can't also relate to all of the originators in my community, and that's fine. But we forget that there's also a generation that is lost,
Mhm.
like your generation that is gone. So that's a really big part of this dance. That's a big miss,
Yeah.
is that it's not just about the dancing. um it's taking the time to learn about the culture.
Yeah.
So this, you also might see like another way people will be spelling the dance, like this new generation. And I think a lot of it comes from like the Toronto community that are fairly new to whacking, or sorry, punking, and they learned it all. They learned whacking in Montreal, and then they went to New York, and then they love everything. They just want to absorb it, but they want to honor everyone. So they will put like a like a H in brackets with the whacking,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then you might see like a heart emoji in the middle, like a heart, like honoring the
Mhm.
history. I think the H is really important to spell it. I think punking and whacking and spelling with the H is, it's important to honor the word,
Mhm.
uh, uh, like the original word, and all the negative things that come with it, because that was actually a reality for folks.
Mhm.
And when and that's how I was practicing it. It was like, oh, it's for me to feel lit, like fierce and fabulous, and to get through my shitty life. This is for me. And it's like, it's not just like a pleasurized like fitness
Yes.
cardio
Right.
dance. It's like, this is people's lives, or
Yes.
lives that were lived. And so you have to, for me, I add the H, and I prefer to say punking, even though it like people don't like that, and people don't want to see that on their screens or in a hashtag. I think, I work with Victor Manuel, and it's really important to him because this dance is about him and his friends that are no longer here. So yeah, I'm going on.
So I'm glad you brought him up, because I wanted you to talk more about him. I know that that you've learned a lot from him, but I know that you would like to continue learning more. So just tell us a bit more about him and how your paths crossed.
Oh my gosh, how did our paths cross? Well, I've been doing this dance since about 2006, and I got kind of like, I was learning this dance when the dance was called voguing and waacking. Because we didn't know what the difference was, like, and then also Vogue was having a interesting thing in the 2000s. It was kind of like going underground again, and then so waacking, so nobody really knew, but we knew it was like a queer dance form. It's like, okay, we kind of share some of the arms, so from there I was like researching both of the dances, and I couldn't do both. I was like one or the other. It's like a lot a lot to learn. And so I would battle more in the waacking. I won a battle with a friend, and we like decided to go like maybe like 2 hours before the battle started, and we just went. It was an all-style battle, and I think the waacking people were like, what was that? Like, I'm going to refer to punking as waacking before I kind of made a discovery. So I was doing the waacking, people really loved it, and I was like, okay, so maybe that's where I sit maybe this is where I belong. Because if I'm learning like social dances, Caribbean folk dances, and then pop dances, and then hip hop dances, I'm like, okay, maybe I belong somewhere. And so when I moved to Toronto in 2011, I met Emily Law, who's also knows a lot of the culture of waacking, and we would battle. Like, we would go. There's so many more battles here, so we would go to Montreal and do BAM, Bust a Move. Sorry, it was we would go to I think it was BAM. Oh, I hope I'm not saying this wrong because it's going on YouTube. And we would battle, and we would session, and we would talk about it, and we would just like, it was fangirling this dance because nobody really knows what it is. So from there I would just take a lot of classes. I would just go to Montreal, battle, get my butt kicked from the Montreal scene, and I did that like intensely for a long time. And around 2006, there was always like whispers of like punking, what punking? Because there's many ways you can say this dance: posing, the garbo, punking. And I was like, what is that? Like, what are we actually going to talk about what that is? And I was just hearing whispers of, oh, it's nothing. It's, you just dance off the music. And then I met a dancer. Her name is Alyssa Chloe. I think it lives in Sweden. And she was here to judge a battle. And it was very different, her style of teaching. And I invited her to teach with Ashely Colours. And we went for a walk and went for a coffee and walk. And we found a movie store. And it was like the Four Fabulous Faces, sorry. And she was like, buy that book right now. And I was like, what? She's like, buy it right now. That is like the original Instagram. That is like the original inspo for this dance, is like the movie, the old Hollywood
So
movie stars.
What are the Four Fabulous Faces? Who are they?
Oh my gosh. Should I get them? I'm going to get
it. Sure.
So.
Because what you have is an artifact, really.
Mine is broken. I broke it because I would take it to teach all these classes.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Four Fabulous Faces. Also, like, I'm not my memory's like bad right now. So it's with Gloria Swanson, Greta Garbo, Joan Crawford, and Marlene Dietrich. Sorry,
Yeah,
Dietrich.
Marlene Dietrich, right. Okay, so it's, yes, these famous
Before,
silver women from the early 20th century. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it's really more about like their the transformation. I don't know, I have to do more research from
Okay.
like silent movies into the talkies, right?
Yes. Okay.
That's really made them the girl, the it girl, right? So it's, I think that is also a thing that's a part of this dance, is like survival and like and
Yes.
switching and changing, transforming and knowing when to change.
Yeah,
So
because not all actors survived that transformation in filmmaking. You had to have the voice as well as the acting chops.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where it's like I felt like a young Jedi, where it's like Alyssa's like, you want to talk to Victor? I know Victor. You better get that book. You better read that book. You better do your research, because he ain't talking to you if you don't do your research. You know what I mean? Because he's an OG. Everyone's probably talking, wants to talk to him. So that's when I started to really do some research. And then I found, because I would go on YouTube and I would check out the Wikipedia, I would see if there's any new information kind of, bubbling up and out. And then there was like, I think Victor Manuel started really talking about the dance online, and he was just answering questions, basic questions that I had. And it matched, the timeline match. It wasn't this like confusion of like dance of, oh, just do the thing and we wear this and we dress like this. Well, why? Victor was like, okay, we did this here, this, and then we did that. And so I was like, okay, it kind of makes more sense to me.
Yes.
So from there, that's before the pandemic. Victor was in Montreal. And so I went, a few of us Torontonians went there, and we met him, and there were him and Archie were talking about this dance, and I got to see Victor dance. I got to see his way of dancing, where I was like, oh, that looks really different from what I was doing. Yeah, so from there I just like messaged him like crazy. I was like, do you want to come to Toronto? Do you want to talk to me? And I think through the pandemic, when I was in grad school, I was like, no, like it's now or never, let's do it. And so from there, we started to really connect. And what helped, it was Zoom, because everyone shades Zoom. And I'm like, I just talked to an originator that I would have to spend so much money or apply for all the grants in the world to go there, and we are connecting weekly on Zoom. Like, wow, like it's done so much for dance, for me, and dance research in general, is being able to just sit and talk about these discoveries versus always just trying to dance it out. Is like, okay, now let's talk about it. Yeah, so that's kind of how we.
So in those Zoom, meetings with him, were you also getting to move? Like, was he teaching you movements? Okay, it's all the background. Yeah.
And I think that's what's one of the things that I think me as like a generation, like a younger generation, is like, we're guests in these dances. So if someone wants to sit and talk about their experience with the dance, I'm like, why not? Like, why not? Like, and as dancers, that's something that I think is good practice for us, is to talk about it. So yeah, I prefer that anyway. I wasn't really in the mood to dance in the pandemic. I don't know about y'all. And it was a good also just like pause, because we weren't battling. We weren't, so there wasn't really like a need for me to like exercise my arms and whatever.
Yeah, it did create an opportunity, because it also gave you time to go to school, right? It gave you time. The pandemic meant that you could go to grad school and really engage with this research, which, like, in the work that you've done, would you say that, like, is there a lot written down about the history of waacking or even other urban dance forms, street dances and so on? or it, like in my mind, it feels like it's a major gap in the history
Yeah.
of recording dance, but I don't know if that's an accurate statement.
I mean, it's been a gap. It's been a big, big, big gap, like a huge gap. And everyone knows it. That's the thing. It's like, it's not a secret that we didn't record these dances. It's not a secret. It's just, I think, I'm going to be real. We wait to the last minute to add these dance forms, you know, when it serves other, you know, like when I grew up, there wasn't any Caribbean dance forms in studios. You know, I would walk into a studio maybe as a teenager because I'm like, oh, well, maybe I can like go and audition and take a class. And people, do you know where you are? Are you lost? Like things like that was not a secret that these forms, and like a lot of microaggressions of like turn down that music, that noise. I was like, it's not noise, it's music. So things like that where it's like, okay, we are being a little bit more diligent now with recording them. There is been a lot of research, especially with breaking and I don't even think it's called break dance, but breaking the like the b-boy b-girl community is really good at recording their own shit because they know people will come in and take their shit and sell it. So they're like, we're going to do our own stuff. So they've always been recording their battles. They always recorded it. I think the ballroom community has been really well documented. Like you have Paris is Burning, you have the other one, geez, I can't remember. And it's like, How Do I Look is like actually like kind of a response to Paris is Burning where they're actually talking about their community. And then you also have lots of documentaries on that. So I think with punking, it's been neglected. They've all been neglected. It's just now because there's been more research with the other forms, I personally feel like it's time that we can focus on punking. It's really about focus and like really like continuously doing the research instead of stop and starting when it's like hip and cool. We can't stop and start. We need to keep going. And that's my rant because I discovered that even jazz dance needs a lot of support still.
Yeah, it's true. You know what I mean? It's true. Yeah, yeah. And so like what issues have you seen in recording those forms? Like is the academy in the way? Does that, you know, sort of what is prioritized in the academy, does that get in the way? Or within particular communities, like what needs to change to make sure that this aspect of dance history is recorded better and written about more?
That's good. A good I was thinking about that today. I was like, am I gonna get that question? The academy is the academy. Like there's a lot of work that has to happen in the academy that I'm like, whoa, like I don't know if I can even tackle the bigger picture of the academy. I think for the reality, that's the thing, is that like the academy is not really reality, especially for folks in this dance. If we're talking about marginalized folks, I'm like, okay, can they even get into the academy? It took me forever to get there. And then knowing what you want to say and what you want to research once you're in there, that's a whole other thing. But in reality, I think it's a lot of like interpersonal relationships. That's what I'm seeing, is that like you can have all the information ready to go. Are people willing to listen? It's really who I'm discovering that is like who they want to listen to and like which like who they want to follow and because some folks just want to dance, some people just want to battle. And I had to come to terms with that too, is like some people just want to battle, some people just need, want to perform it, and like not everybody wants to write about it. And, so it's a lot of interpersonal things that
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that is so deeper than dance research, that I'm like,
Yeah.
it's everyone's personal preferences and taste levels.
Yeah.
So with me, that's where I'm like, it actually is quite helpful to like notice that, where it's like, it is so much bigger than me, that if I just like sit and focus on one person and one idea and one thing, I think if we like write it down, we can leave our mark, so that, maybe there's another colors that comes through 20 years from now. And my goal is to just have the book there.
Yeah.
So if they're researching something in grad school, it's there, and they don't have to like outsource the information and
Yes,
bring it
because
into the institution.
that's right. And
You
we
know what I
find
mean?
that I totally understand that in like what, because really when you look at Canadian dance history and our sort of our pioneer historians, it doesn't go back very far. It goes back into the 80s. I mean, Dance Collection Dolls didn't even exist until 1986, right? So it's like you need that layer of documentation, that layer of history writing that the next generation can then build on, right? So if you write the book
Yeah.
now, as you say, a generation
Yeah.
later, someone has that
Yeah,
to build from, right? And
generation.
they're gonna learn new things. And also, I mean, right, when we look at historiography, our perspectives change from generation to generation as to what do we value in our society and how do we write about history. All of that changes from generation to generation as well. um so I totally understand what you're saying there, and it's getting that first layer of documentation
Get it.
down.
Just put it down.
Yeah.
Just put it down with no beefs, no nothing. Just put the information down, and someone will. And this is one of the things I find with dance, is that people come to dance for a sense of belonging. So if they don't see themselves represented anywhere, they're gonna leave, and
Right.
then they're gonna talk ish about dance, and they're never gonna come back, right? So
Yeah.
we have to just bring that in, just
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
just a little.
Yeah. And I think another possible issue, and let me know if you agree with this, is that there must also be an element of trust required, right? So for Victor to open up to someone like you, who initially is a complete stranger, to open up
Yeah,
about this form where survival has been like an essential element of the dance form and its creation and evolution. um that's got to be key for those originators, right? To be able to open up and trust their story with somebody.
yeah, yeah. It's trust. It's building trust. It's respect. It's every day. It's like, like learning who the person you're talking, the person, not the dancer, not the dancer for your research. It's not, they're not a thing. They're a person that's, their vessel is their body and their
Yeah.
emotions. So really, and that's also comes back to like interpersonal skills, and really getting to know who they are. And I can also relate to Victor in many many ways, that I was like, oh, this is like, I'm also not alone, as like, he's also like help guiding me. And because he's a dancer and has done so many things, he's telling me the little hacks of like dance, right? So there's two things happening.
Mhm.
There's a friendship that's starting to happen, and there's limitations of like, yes, I want to do that. Can I do that? I don't think so, right? And so a lot of conversations of like um accessibility for both of us.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I find there's definitely an element of care in doing this kind of work.
Mhm.
Especially when you're a historian working with a living generation. It's different when you're going back so many decades or centuries that there is no one to talk to, and you're relying on the archival evidence to direct you. But but certainly when you're working with a living generation, there is that there's a person behind the story, right? And we can't forget that, because I think too often our society does forget that. That's why we get into trouble and beefs and
Oh yeah, a lot
can't
of
get
trouble.
along and that kind of thing,
Street
right?
dance is all trouble.
So yeah, that element of care is, I think, really important in the archival work that we do, and the gathering of history and the writing of history that we do as historians.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's wild. This like documenting. I was like, wow.
Yeah, it is pretty wild,
Work
isn't
never
it?
stops, right?
It is, and once you get into it, it's easy to get addicted to it too.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, the rabbit holes that you start
a rabbit hole. Everyone's like, I'm in a rabbit hole. I'm like, you ain't seen nothing.
Yeah, I think one of the like in just processing archives here at DCD, you try to be efficient in what you're doing, but it's really easy to become inefficient as you start to read things, and then you want to learn more, and then you go looking up stuff, and right. But I still think that that's an essential part of the process, because when you get to the cataloging and actually describing what's there, having all that contextual knowledge only helps the next person, right? It only helps the next researcher.
Yeah, and like I realize that it's like you can't do it all in one generation either, right? It's just like leave a gap. There's gonna be gaps open. Like we don't know everything. We won't. So
Yes.
just leave a gap open for the next person
Yeah,
or the
exactly.
door.
Yeah, the door. Yeah. Yeah, because it's also amazing what pops up subsequently. Like it amazes me when we still get materials that have come from the 1920s or earlier, and they've been hiding in somebody's attic or somebody's basement,
Private, all the
right?
private
Yeah,
collectors,
all the
right?
private collections. So there are inevitably gaps, because not everything has been made publicly accessible yet. And so
Mhm.
for sure, for the next generation, something from the early 20th century will come out of the woodwork when, it's sort of least expected. And that's kind of exciting, right? That we can always be recovering these things. I mean, yeah.
And I also think people that don't even know it's a dance thing. I'm walking into a comic book store and I was like, oh, this is what Victor's talking about. Comic books at the
Uh-huh.
store,
Yes.
radio. You know what I mean? Imagination. Like,
Yes, yes.
oh,
Yeah, well, I'm old enough to remember the Batman reruns that would be on after school, where
mhm.
the Adam West generation of
Yeah,
Batman,
super
yeah,
campy.
where you really saw it, pow, came up on the screen, or bam, came up on the screen, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Anyhow, we've come up to 2 o'clock. It's been great. Yeah, it's been great to talk with you as always, Ashely. Thank you so much for being our guest today
Thank
on
you.
DCD Discover.